pupils in this great country of ours are suffering, guys, because of the after effects of the pandemic. Schools were closed, children weren't getting the proper lessons, and we're seeing now some of the worst exam results for over a decade. I'm joined with Bobby Seagull, who's a broadcaster and a mathematical genius. Is that correct, Bobby?
Well, let's say...
Just say genius, yeah. It is a genius.
And a star of University Challenge.
And unfortunately, back here again
Can't
at
get
the
rid of me,
table
mate.
is my mother's favourite, Matthew Larza. Look, let's discuss this, guys. The pandemic, if we could go back in time, I think we'd do things differently. I certainly would as a Member of Parliament. Mm-hmm. Some of the way we voted was, we pushed back behind closed doors, but I wanted children to be at school all the way through. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing now, Bobby, the results of this, mental health problems, they're behind with the studies, they fail in exams, and this is going to affect their whole life choices, surely.
Yeah, there was a report by the Nuffield Foundation recently that said that children by 2030, I think only 40% of children will get good grades in maths and English, and it's a drop from now. So we're going to see the worst results in a generation. And I think these students, they missed out on academic learning, and the way learning works in school, especially with maths and English, is quite foundational. If you, again, in history, if you miss a term, if you miss studying the Tudors, it's okay, you can learn about World War II separately. But in maths, if you miss fractions, learning about decimals and percentages becomes more difficult. In English, you miss the topic about nouns, then all the other things become more challenging. And I think we're going to see that compounding impact of learning. Sometimes you get compounding being an incredible force for good, but actually you're going to see a negative compounding. So you've got the academic side, but also young people are social beings.
And they're competitive as well,
yeah,
aren't they?
they need to see how others are doing. Oh, they got 7 to 70%.
I want to beat that.
And they'd had 2 years of a lack of that. So I think we're going to see the impact of that socially.
Now we're going to go back in time now, Bobby, because the great Matthew Larza, he was telling me earlier that when he was at school, he used to dress up as a Victorian mill owner and
mill worker.
Sorry, but I don't think
anybody actually
learn about history. Is
I mean,
true?
so I went to a primary school in a Tory-controlled county council in the 80s, but it was a school that sort of got the trendy teaching bug, which frankly everybody got in the 70s and 80s, and we learned through creative play. We dressed up as Maoris. Can you believe that? You certainly wouldn't be doing that now as New Zealand Maoris for a week, and a week as Victorian sort of street urchins and mill workers, and we did this incredible system where you learned, you didn't write anything down, you used effectively Scrabble letters. It was called Breakthrough, and I think one of David Blunkett, when he became Education Secretary's first act was to scrap it, because it was one of those sort of ultimate trendy ways of of learning. So I don't think we did enough maths in primary school, which is what I think we really missed out on, because as you say, the basics, if you don't have the building blocks, then that makes it so much more difficult later on.
I think you get, as maths, you get like, if you get a negative experience early on in your life, when you're 5, 6 or 11, then for the rest of your life you're scarred and you think, I can't do maths. And I see that as a secondary teacher.
So maths, it's not the sexiest of subjects, is it? People look at it like science and think, oh, what's the point?
Unless Bobby's teaching it.
Yeah, back in the day when you were at school, you could understand why we needed maths, because there was no calculators, no computers, and stuff like that.
We had calculators by the time I was at school.
Well, we didn't when I was at school. I think they were just coming in.
You had slide rule.
Yeah, we had slide rules. Yeah, we had a slide rule. But children now, they've got the gimmicks, they've got the watches, they've got the phones. They sort of say, well, what's the point?
So I think it's to do with giving young people the confidence to think that they can take on the world, as it were. Because again, maths is not just algebra and trigonometry. I love those things, but it's practical numeracy. A lot of young people, they struggle looking at their pay statements, understanding what taxes are. Even if they're trying to plan cooking a meal, they're looking at the recipe and the ingredients, and they're like, what's going on here for 2 people, for 4 people, or they're planning a journey to work and they have no idea to read a bus timetable. There's a lot of practical bits of numeracy. And again, my students, if you talk to them about football or league tables, they'll tell you, West Ham, we need to get the next 3 games, win it, and then we've got probably a chance of coming, probably Conference League, maybe Europa League. They're doing all these calculations, and I think the problem is people think maths is just algebra and trigonometry, but anything with numbers in the real world or data or logic is an application of maths.
And we now live in a data-driven world, so actually, bizarrely, in a world where you do have calculators and everything's done on your computer, your phone or your watch, you actually need those maths skills more, because data is the biggest sort of growth industry.
So we've got elections coming up as well, so maths plays a big part in data collection, the way people vote, the demographics and stuff like that. But I want to talk about white privilege, guys. Bobby, I think your background's Indian. I think your parents were Indian. And they came to our country because in our country, people from different cultures come in and see amazing opportunities that you can go and get a good education, get a good job, and live a wonderful way of life, probably better than the countries they come from, which is great. But why is it, when we hear people bang on about white privilege and, people like me and Matthew have got more opportunities, etc. Yeah, kids from India and from China do better at school in maths and sciences.
So I think it's partly cultural. So if you look at South Asian, East Asian families, when they move to, let's say, the US or the UK, their parents or grandparents will say, we're in this country now, there's a great opportunity. If you study hard, you can do A-levels, go to universities, get a good job. And that was drilled into us from a young age. Again, this is the land of opportunity. But interestingly, I do think that sometimes, again, my kids, my siblings' kids' generation, they tend to sort of normalize to the mean. So while I've worked hard, I worry that my children will be like, I'll sit back here, Dad, life is really comfortable here. So they'll sort of mean revert. But I definitely think the first generation, when they come to a sort of Western country, they've got this urge to sort of work hard. And
that's probably why Matthew was dressing up as mill workers all those years ago.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting, the differential achievement. I think there are really things to be learned. But as you say, anybody who just bandies around the term white privilege needs to break it down. And one of the things is that white working class boys in particular are underachievers in Britain's schools, and we need to work out why that is, and we need to address that directly. So it's about, I hate sort of simple labels. It's about looking at the detail of the situation and seeing what's right to support everybody, because we need everybody to do better in school, because we need a more skilled workworce for the world, the sort of globalised world out there.
Well, it is annoying, Bobby, when I see someone, because I visit schools on a regular basis, some good schools, some not so good. They think that, we've had a decent education system in this country for the best part 150, 200 years, where kids have been able to go and learn how to read and write, but we seem to be being overtaken by other countries, other cultures that come to this, people that come to this country and say, wow, this is great, this is free education. I know it's not free at university, but there is still massive opportunities in this country.
Yeah, I think, again, it's one of the things where in this world we can be quite negative and cynical. And I read a book by Hans Rosling, and he's a book author that talked about how we can look at the world using data. And actually, most people, if you ask them, they say, the world is, everything's going wrong. But actually, the last 50, 100 years, longer life expectancy, better literacy, better numeracy, better rights for women, ethnic minorities. So sometimes we always want to improve, but I think we get lost a bit in the sort of negative.
Yeah, I think one of the most despairing things, actually, I would say about the last decade and a half. The Tories are responsible for it in part, but also you're not in the Tories anymore. I'm allowed to say it.
But you're looking at me with that stare again, Matthew, aren't you? You're glaring at me.
Your mum will tell me off. But I think what is the sort of lack of hope and the lack of optimism about the future is something that we need to back in. And actually, I think that takes us back into schools, because I think if people feel that they're not going to be able to get a good job, that it's not worth studying hard, then that, in fact, if you don't have optimism about your future, then you're less likely to perform at school. So I think optimism is actually absolutely vital.
But there is in
our national
there is in
story.
the society, guys, a lot of poor me syndrome. People expect people to knock on their door and offer them the best job in the world, in a nice flash car and a house and lots of money. It doesn't happen like that, does it?
No, I think one of the things I try to teach my students is there are opportunities there, but you've got to go and knock on the doors. If you're not knocking on the doors, no one's going to deliver for you.
I mean, that's what I'd say about your part of the world, about Ashfield, which is that people, obviously, in a former mining community, people have lost their sense of identity because of a previously dominant industry, and I totally understand that. But one of the ways that people are going to be prosperous in the future is by raising education achievement. So, as you know better than me, your area has one of the lower number of people who go to university, and actually that, raising that, but having people who go into university to come back rather than just going to the big cities is a big issue as well.
People go away to uni, and the brightest of us never come back. We've got a lot of good apprenticeships now, and I always say to young people, when I go into schools, look, think about an apprenticeship, because you can earn, you can learn, you're not going to get into debt, and a lot of them offer that pathway to having that degree, which was otherwise unthinkable. Guys, brilliant conversation. Love to have you back on the show, Bobby. Not so sure about him there.